The following podcast is brought to you on behalf of the Saracen Supporters Association and is not an official product of Saracens Limited. Content provided voluntarily by our guests and contributors are of their own opinion, which may change over time and should not be taken as fact, particularly as the podcast hosts are regularly talking drivel anyway. If you've got some drivel of your own you'd like to share, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at fezcast_SSA. You can search Facebook for the Fezcast, or you can email fezcast.ssa@outlook.com.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Welcome everyone to episode 22, I think, of the Fezcast. As we've said on the last few, they're all blending into each other, but we are currently the number one rugby podcast in Taiwan. So top stuff, really. It's Matt and Barry here with you this week. Barry, how you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Plodding on through January. It never seems to end, does it?
No, but obviously you are having the most difficult January of all of us, given that you've decided to go dry for January.
Yeah, well, confession time. I fell off the wagon on Saturday, but that was a planned event. So I'm back on it now until the Six Nations starts. That'll be my next drink.
Yeah, I must admit, I've never bothered with dry January purely because my birthday is about 3 days before the end of it, so it's never going to happen. But yeah, hey-ho. But yeah, we got plenty to talk about this week, haven't we? There's a lot of things going on the pitch, off the pitch, around the pitch. So yeah, but I think we should start with some of the wider news from around the Saracens family, because there's a few people that have moved on to various different places from other clubs. But we'll start with Mo Botha, who was a guest on the Fezcast right at the start of the season. Actually, he's left our friends at Ampthill and he's joining the Belgium setup.
Yeah, terrific opportunity for him. Working for Mike Ford, I believe, over there. Who's is he taken over as head coach or director of rugby, or whatever they call it in their setup? But Mike Ford's worked previously with Germany, I think, as well, hasn't he, if I remember correctly? So plenty of international experience and a great chance for Mo to cut his teeth at that level, and we wish him all the best for it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some of our listeners that are going, Belgium? Do they even play rugby? But I mean, they're sort of one of those nations that do sort of bubble under in that second tier in Europe, don't they? And by all accounts, there's some good things happening. So it'd be interesting to see what sort of progress they make over the course of Mo's time with them and Mike Ford's as well. So yeah, we definitely wish all the best to Mo Botha and Tom Whiteley as well, who's formerly of this parish. We obviously let him go at scrum half a couple of years ago, and he moved on to Bristol. But he's got another move again into Leicester's side.
Yeah, a great move for him. Obviously, he gets to work again with Wiggy, so Wiggy must obviously knows him and has seen something there and something that he feels he can work with. The only downside to that is it means that Wiggy is definitely not coming back onto the pitch, which is a tremendous shame. Although, I mean, he's nearly as old as me these days, but he's been a great servant to the game over the years and a great player. And obviously, we wish him the best in his coaching career. But it's a shame that he's had to hang up the boots, and it's a shame that it's not been on his own terms, as it were. But yeah, a great chance for Tom to work. And I mean, if you're going to be a professional rugby player, Leicester is probably one of the clubs you want to put on your CV.
You think so, yeah. And Tom's someone that I think when he left us, I don't know that any of us were too surprised necessarily. He was sort of slowly working his way into the squad, but I'd probably say chalk and cheese, actually. Richard Wigglesworth and Tom Whiteley, they're two very, very different scrum halves. And Wigglesworth, very solid, very reliable, box-kicking scrum half. And Tom Whiteley, prone to the odd brain fart, I think, but also moments of genius. And could spot a gap as well as any decent nine in the league. So someone needs to get the best out of him, and he could be a very, very good scrum half, and maybe Wiggy's the man to do it, because like I say, he's worked with him before, so he's obviously seen something, and yeah, we'll see what happens, won't we?
Yeah, he couldn't have a better teacher than Richard Wigglesworth, so all the best to him, except for when we play him in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And on to our current players. And we'll start with one in the women's side. A bit of important news, really, and I think something that's very good for, again, for the development of women's rugby. There's an independent players' union that's been set up by Nolly Waterman, I believe, and I think actually Polly Barnes might have a hand in it, unless I'm getting confused with other bits. But I think that might be something else. But yeah, the independent union, the RPA, has existed for a long time, but now there is a specific women's players association with a representative from each team. Outside of Saracens, the likes of Bryony Cleal and Ellie Lennon, who have previously played for us, are involved. But it's Mika Evans, who's not long in our side, actually, who's representing Saracens as a fairly young and inexperienced player. Has obviously got quite a lot of responsibility now, but pretty important to have this union in place, really, isn't it, Barry?
Yeah, definitely. Although we'll come on to other matters in part two, I think you can see what happens when administrators make decisions without reference to players that vastly affect players, and it is important that they have representation in the decision making process, and this can only help. And I presume that Mika's been elected by a fellow players. I mean, I guess that's the way this works, as it were. If you're a sort of shop steward within the union, you must be elected. You can't be picking the names out of a hat. So I'm sure that she's got the confidence to go on and do it, and clearly got the backing of the rest of the squad.
I think that is indeed how it's happened. So yeah, good for her to have the backing, and yeah, like you say, very important for the players to have an official voice as well as a social media voice. I think, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but the other story we've got, that's the one that's probably rumbling on and has rumbled on for a long time, that we've discussed already, is Billy Vunipola. Obviously, the news that Tom Willis had come in made us all think that maybe his days at Saracens were numbered, and there's always been articles about him moving on. But one that's got a little bit more specifics in it, actually, is one from, I hate to read the Mail Online, but they did have an article about Saracens. Billy Vunipola potentially looking at a move to Tokyo Sungoliath in Japan. Obviously, it would be a pretty decent payday there. They have got a vacancy at number 8 with a player leaving next season, and a certain Eddie Jones is also an advisor for that team. So quite a few links there. But apparently Billy does still have a contract with Saracens for next season, but there is every chance that it could be that he could be let go if the deal is right, which, I don't know, we've discussed it before. It could be, it could be reasonable, couldn't it, Barry?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, from Billy's point of view, or from any player's point of view, the chance to grab that top up of the pension pot has got to be a big lure, especially with Japan and the continuing salary cap woes that we have in this country. I mean, we've seen the mass exodus of players from other clubs, and it's still continuing now with Freddie Burns off to New Zealand, we believe. Well, it's pretty much confirmed, actually. So yeah, players will continue to move, and you wouldn't. Billy owes us nothing. He's been a great servant to the club. I'm assuming that when he goes, his brother will go with him. So it will be a double blow for us if it does happen. But you can't hold anything against them looking to top up that pension fund. And if he goes, he'll obviously go with our best wishes. And we have got, as you say, one heck of a replacement potentially. Lined up already in Tom Willis, and what a player. I mean, I was watching him at the weekend, and he is in some fine form.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you. Billy owes us absolutely nothing, and Tom Willis, he's not going to be Billy Vunipola or be his own man, but I think it could potentially be another good piece of recruitment by Saracens. And I must admit, I'm not sure that Mako will disappear off if Billy does. I think they've got slightly different ties at home potentially. Which might mean that one goes one way, one goes another. But, it's silly season. This is going to go on for weeks, months, and it'll continue every single season. And we'll keep talking about it, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it gives us something to fill the podcast minutes with, if nothing else.
This isn't filler, Barry. This is proper stuff, and we haven't done a proper news roundup for a while, actually. So it is nice just to run through things. But yeah, we should probably talk about a few things on the pitch, shouldn't we? But we'll start with the women's team because they've got back to winning ways, haven't they? A good 10-try victory over Worcester, which I think is pretty timely, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure they would have taken any sort of win after the recent results that they've had. But yeah, it was important to get a win, and then it was, despite the scoreline looking a little bit one-sided, it was actually quite a competitive game. It wasn't until the end that we sort of ran away with it and ran up the score a little bit. Worcester were well in it for a good portion of the game, and we had to play some pretty good rugby to overcome them. I mean, you probably got a few names down as well, but I mean, I was exceptionally impressed with Sydney Gregson at 13. Great direct and threatening running from the outside centre, and some great. I mean, Zoe Harrison, what a player, and what a pair of boots on her as well. I mean, kicked everything superbly, apart two conversions that she missed, one of which hit the post. But it's great kicking from hand, great kicking from off the tee, and some superb play all round.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you mentioned Zoe Harrison. I mean, I don't think it would be particularly offensive for me to say that the conversion rate in the women's game is well behind the men's still, although it's creeping up quite quickly. But Zoe Harrison is up there with the best of them in the men's game, let alone the women's game. So yeah, she's absolutely outstanding. I was impressed by pretty much everyone, to be honest. Although there was definitely facets of the game that I think we were still struggling a little bit with, which says a lot that we still managed to score 10 tries. But May Campbell and Kelsey Clifford both having a milestone day. They could easily have sort of felt the pressure of that and played within themselves a bit. But Kelsey scored a try within 2 minutes or whatever it was, and May Campbell just did what May Campbell does, really, and ever reliable diminutive hooker, as the Saracens email called her, which seems a bit like junk mail to me, but there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she scores tries for fun, but it was great to see Jess Breach out there as well, scoring a couple, and her second try was a lovely finish off a great crossfield kick from Holly Aitchison that was deserved a wider audience than it probably got on the day and on YouTube. If you've got 5 minutes, folks, go and find it. It's well worth watching.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen plenty, certainly from Jess Breach over the years in a different coloured shirt. But yeah, Holly Aitchison, definitely a great playmaker at inside centre as well. And yeah, I mean, the highlight reel for Jess, I'm sure, is going to get longer and longer as she integrates into the Saracen squad. But yeah, my player of the match, and I think it was Donna Rose's player of the match on commentary as well, was actually Louise McMillan in the second row, who was busy, bustling, I think was the phrase used, and scored a try, which I love seeing second rows break the line, because it is just like a loose giraffe just running down the pitch. She's I think so far my signing of the season, potentially look very, very lively and very athletic and strong as well.
Yeah, we were pretty good through the forwards, and you'd expect that of a side that includes Poppy Clear and Marley Packer. You would expect nothing less, really. We were good in the forwards, and when we released the back, so that they look good as well. I've got to say a special mention though for Worcester Warriors Paige Farries, who was absolutely superb. Her second try. I mean, never let a rugby ball bounce, and the bounce clearly confused the heck out of the fullback. But what a great finish!
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, for a week we're talking about Saracen scoring 10 tries. Worcester still got 20 odd points on the board, and a lot was to do with Paige Farries. Yeah, a brilliant turn of pace and athleticism. So I think from a Saracen's point of view, that is, there's defensive frailties to work on. But yeah, take nothing away from the Worcester winger there. She was absolutely outstanding. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, both sides will be disappointed with their work at the restarts, because it seemed that every time someone scored, the team receiving the restart then made a complete hash of it and let the other side back in with some points or back in with some field position. So plenty to work on, despite the result. But the result was obviously key after the recent defeats that we've had, and on to, is it Bristol away next? I think
It is, yeah.
That'll be an interesting game because from what I know, Bristol have been in quite good form as well. So it's a very competitive league this season. It's not, and that's only good for the league and for the sport. It's not someone galloping away with it. I mean, I know Gloucester Hartbury are up there, but and unbeaten, I think, this season. But it's competitive, and that can only be good for the game.
Absolutely, and I mean, we don't want to see teams running away with it all the time, as Saracens did for a few years. But if a new team, like Gloucester Hartbury, does have that run, then you can only say fair enough. It might be a different team next year. But I think that game against Bristol, I've got a feeling we're sort of sitting in fourth, and Bristol level on points with us in fifth. So it could be that whichever one of those teams loses, having sort of found a little bit of form, then drops away a little bit again from the playoff race, and the other one sort of is pushing up towards third, second as well. So there's a lot to ride on that, and going away to Bristol for any team is going to be tough, men's or women's. Really, it's always a tough place to go down there. So.
Absolutely. They're always competitive at whatever they do. I mean, I know obviously their men's team has struggled a little bit this season, and you kind of wonder if there's something going on there that we're not aware of. But they're always competitive. They're never going to be an easy game.
Absolutely not. Well, we've managed to cover that pretty well, I think. But strap in, everyone, because when we come back in a second, we're going to be talking about the laws of rugby. So. Grab a coffee, stay awake.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracen Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Welcome back, everyone. Unless you've been living under a rock, there's pretty big ructions coming in the world of rugby and the laws in the community game. But before we discuss that, we're going to talk about a couple of the highlights from the European rugby over the course of the weekend, because it has been notable actually that a lot of rugby social media has been putting out more highlight reels than in previous seasons, which is good to see because it's bringing rugby into the public eye a little bit. So two that really caught both Barry and my eye. We'll start with Ty Burns sort of it was cheeky really, wasn't it, Barry?
Well, yeah, I mean it was incredibly quick thinking to get himself out of trouble. It was a smart piece of sympathetic refereeing to just let the game go, which was great. But he did use his hands in the ruck. He was off his feet, and he could have given away about 4 penalties in the process of doing it. But no, it was great to see. And as I say, well done to the referee for just saying thank you and letting the game flow, which is what we really want, because he could have just said, "Oh, you're using your hands in the ruck. You're not rolling away." There was a million things he could have penalised, but it was great that he didn't and just let the game go.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's a perfect example of a referee using common sense, really. I mean, if you've not seen it, everyone. So Ty Burn has got involved in a tackle that could potentially turn into a maul. It hasn't. He's flopped over the top of the ruck, and he's completely obscuring play, and will very easily be pinged for both not rolling away and going over the top of a ruck. But instead, he manages to pick the ball out from the middle of it and play it back to the opposition 9 so the game can continue. Now, yeah, as Barry said, he's given away a few penalties just by touching the ball in the ruck and delivering it on. But yeah, I think good common sense refereeing to sort of spot that he's done his best to allow the game to play, knowing that he's infringing. And I don't think there was any complaints really from the attacking side.
No, well, there shouldn't be. I mean, it was perfect presentation. The ball was there for the 9 to pick up and play.
That was a pretty quick ball as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. But the second one as well, which was as we discussed off air between myself and Barry, all the better for being against Harlequins. But Eben Esterbeth, knowing the law book, and in a caterpillar ruck that's nice and slow and boring, he's noticed that someone hitting the ruck has dislodged Joe Marler from the back of it, meaning that the ball under his legs is suddenly in play, and Esterbeth has grabbed it, and as I said earlier, second row, running like a giraffe through everyone and to the try line and scoring. It's really fun, really, actually, Barry, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's completely right. When you look at it, Joe Marler's just leaning on the guy in front of him. He's not bounding at the shoulder, so therefore he's not part of the ruck. And then to make it even more live, Danny Kerr goes and picks it up and moves it back and takes his hands off of it. So I'm not entirely sure, but I think the fact that he picked it up, brought it back, and then took his hands away from it meant it was out anyway, irrespective of Joe Marler. But a bit of a faux pas by Mr. Marler, and Danny Kerr left there looking at the ball and the referee as Esterbeth scoots off towards the try line. It's quite enjoyable to watch.
Absolutely. But I mean, we always complain about the technicalities of the very, very long rugby law book, but actually when players know it and exploit it and take advantage of it, then it can generate highlights like that, which is brilliant. But we obviously do need to talk about the massive news out of the RFU's vault of secrecy. In that
I wonder where that was going for a minute.
Well, yeah. Out of the RFU's backside, by the sounds of it, as well. That the community game as of next season is moving to tackling below the waist, based, I'm sure, on some logic that we're not actually aware of yet, and it's caused huge ructions, both from players and coaches within the community game, within the youth game, and from professional players themselves. I mean, I can see why, we could talk about it for hours, why they're trying to potentially get ahead of the game a little bit in some ways by announcing such a move. But it's pretty shocking, really, isn't it, Barry?
Yeah, it seems to have. I don't think there was any consultation on it. It certainly doesn't sound like there was. It seems to be. Let's be generous. Let's say it's a well-intentioned but possibly not very well thought out suggestion, and I've not heard anyone say a good word about it who's actually involved in the game. I can see it leading to more issues for tacklers, and all it will do is move the head injury from the bloke carrying the ball onto the one trying to bring him down. And I'd be uncomfortable with two games anyway, or two sets of rules anyway. But that's kind of what we're going to get. You know, when Charlie Reynolds West goes and plays for Harpenden at level 5, I think it is, he can't tackle above the waist, and yet he's going to come back to Saracens and all of a sudden be expected to tackle, underneath it. And it just seems so strange. Why couldn't they have gone for something like the armpits or somewhere around that kind of level? Yeah, great. We need to reduce head-on-head collisions, and we'll come on to those in a bit, I'm sure. But I don't know. I can't work out the logic behind it. They say it's data-driven, but I think that's probably just I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I'm sure there'll have to be some sort of further clarification or further thought about it. I mean, there's a line in here where it says that they will be encouraging ball carriers to follow the principle of evasion. I mean, what are they going to do? Dangle a cream cake at them or something? What is encouragement for a ball carrier to follow the principle of evasion? I mean, daft. And it just changes the nature of the game so much at that level that I can't see how it's going to work. I genuinely can't.
Yeah, I must admit I'm struggling with it as well. And it says a lot when the Progressive Rugby organisation, who are front and centre whenever there's any kind of head contact in rugby. They're quite rightly all over it, really. Even they have turned round and gone, whoa, this is a fairly... I don't want to use the word reactionary. I don't want to use the word extreme, but they were quite shocked at how quickly the RFU's made this move and how big a move it is. It is the trial in the championship has been quoted as part of what they've been speaking about. Now that trial, a lot of people are saying it just led to more concussions for tacklers with knees to the head and feet to the head and hips to the head and all sorts. There are some flaws in that study. I have looked at it before. I'm not going to sit here and go through everything because I'm going to make a mistake. But yes, there were some more concussions, but it's not the full, it's simple story just to say that. But yeah, I think I'm certainly with you, Barry. I'm not in favour of having effectively two different sets of rules for the same game. I understand, there being an evolution in the game from youth rugby to community rugby to professional rugby. There has to be some differences in how the game's played. But one of the things that they've talked about as well is that it's a move designed to have the game flowing and less kick tennis but that the kick tennis side of things is a professional problem. If anyone from the RFU's actually watched the amateur game, that really doesn't happen. It is more about free-flowing rugby already, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. If anyone from the RFU's actually seen community rugby, because I don't think many of them have. I go and watch my local side when I can, when Saracens and work life and other commitments allow. And you don't see that. You might see a couple of kicks, maybe 3 at the most, and then eventually pretty quickly someone will hoof it out on the full or skew it off to the side or whatever. It just doesn't happen to the level that it does in the in the professional game, because they're simply, at the end of the day, the kickers aren't good enough or don't have the big boots to do it. It just seems strange, and I mean, it's going to change so much. How are we going to have them all?
Probably not, are we?
Well, we're not. No. So what do we do with lineouts?
Yeah, it's for us to come up with the answers right now. I think
absolutely, yeah.
And I'm struggling with what's going on, but there's going to be so much more to come on this, and so I think there's no doubt we're going to be discussing it on future shows as well, won't we? I'm sure Jez will have something to say about it. Yes, I think we're lucky that he's not here. Otherwise, this show would be 2.5 hours long, wouldn't it? But as it's just the two of us, we'll probably move on, because actually we're going to be discussing almost the other side of the coin, really, with a couple of incidents from the Edinburgh game and obviously going through the game itself. So we'll be back in a second.
Hi guys, I'm Alex Linton and I'm a proud Looseheads ambassador.
I'm Sydney Gregson and I'm a Looseheads ambassador.
We're a rugby mental health charity working to tackle the stigma. You can find us at Looseheads on all social media channels or at looseheads.co.uk.
The Looseheads mission is to place a mental health lead at every rugby club. Get in touch now to find out more. Take care and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Enjoy the rest of the pod.
This is the Fezcast.
Welcome back to the final part of this week's show. We're obviously going to discuss the big game from the weekend for the men against Edinburgh, which was a loss, but not quite a loss, but sort of a win, but maybe. I think that's about the sum of it, isn't it, Barry?
Yeah. We did well. We did well to only lose by 6 in the end, but yeah, I mean, it could have gone either way, and it was another one of those bizarre endings. Actually, Edinburgh needed another score to get the home game, in the round of 16, and promptly hoofed it out from a. I mean, they were going backwards. They were under pressure, but even if they'd been turned over and lost the ball and we'd gone in and scored a try and converted it, they would still have gone through anyway and got an away tie. So I really don't quite get what they were going on, what they were thinking of there. Having said that, of course, you can't expect rugby players to stand there and work out in the middle of a game exactly how many points they need and what points difference and what the criteria is for separating clubs that have finished on level points and level points difference as well. So, yeah, strange old game. We didn't play very well until the end. I mean, we scored a cracking try. Ben Earl's try, I was watching it again earlier, was superb because he starts off inside Ironi Maui and realizes where the space is and actually gets himself in the right position. And, you know, top play from a forward, that would have been, you'd have been impressed if a back had seen that, because he could have just put his head down and charged and stayed inside and expected the ball to come back in. But he got outside him where the space was and cantered in for a super try. But that was probably about the highlight from our side, really, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah. I mean, definitely shout to Ironi Maui, actually, because he would have got on a plane or whatever up to Edinburgh, not expecting to actually even be in the 23. So to have to come on relatively early, I guess, in prop terms, and perform as well as he did, having not expected to be performing at all. Yeah, fair play to him. I mean, go back to Edinburgh kicking the ball. We'll talk about the final moments of the game first, because that's what we do. You can sort of forgive if they'd have kicked the ball out, if there were a few games going on at the same time and they just sort of knew they needed to secure a win and get any kind of knockout fixture. But obviously every other game had finished by the time ours had kicked off. So you would think that everyone knew exactly what the permutations were. And it seemed actually in the post-match interview with Mike Blair that everyone did know what they were, but he was quite happy with what the team decided to do. Now, I haven't looked in great detail because, to be honest, I can't be bothered at what would have happened had we gone up the other end and scored another try and Edinburgh had lost. Presumably a slightly more difficult away fixture for them in their eyes, I guess. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think they'd have finished 6th instead of 5th. So it was literally one place, and yeah, it would have been a different opposition. I don't know who it is, who they would have played, but yeah, it does seem strange. They might as well have had a go and lost trying rather than not. And I suppose for the post-match interview, he's not really going to stand there and slag his players off for making the wrong decision, is he? So perhaps he said something slightly different in the changing room.
Potentially, yeah. But, bigger picture, though, Edinburgh beating Saracens, you could see what it meant to them. So maybe actually that's given them a bit of momentum for the next few weeks for them anyway. And at the end of the day, they did deserve to win, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As I've already said, we did well to only lose by that few points. We were never really in that game other than the fact that we defended stoically, I think is the word. And we just refused to be trampled on as it looked like we were going to be. I mean, there's contentious things with their second try. I mean, I've watched it again, and I can't work out how it's not obstruction. But there we go. These things sometimes don't get given. They had a try chalked off in the first half that the referee gave. I mean, he dropped the ball before he got to the line, and the referee was looking at it. I mean, I'm not quite sure what he saw or didn't see, but there we go. Fortunately, the TMO picked that one up. It was not our best performance by a long shot. No.
I was chatting to a friend of mine throughout the game who is an Edinburgh born and bred, and we both actually commented on the fact that the referee was picking up on some very sort of technical free kick offences over the course of the game, but also missing probably 20 or 30 penalties that he could have given for either side. So, yeah, it was a very strangely refereed game. He was being very picky in some situations, but letting the game carry on in others. So, there's definitely some social media, certainly from the Saracens side of things, who think we've been hard done by the referee. But I think Edinburgh would have exactly the same thing to say, really. It's just one of those games where I'm not sure the referee had his best performance. And we will talk in a second about who actually came off worse out of those when we go through all of the incidents. But yeah, what do you reckon, Barry?
Yeah, it's one of those games, and I've seen lots of these over the years. And you come off and you think the referee's had a not had one of his best performances. Let's put it that way. But he's not actually decided the outcome of the game at the end of the day. And much as I was jumping up and down at Edinburgh's second try being given, I don't think he cost us that game. I just don't think we played well enough to beat them.
No, I definitely think you're right. To be honest, I mean, you had the well, look, that Edinburgh try. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that could have been chalked off. So that's 5 points we lost there. And I also think that maybe we were unlucky not to get a penalty try when Sam Skinner was yellow carded for bringing them all down. So there's potentially a 10-point swing there, which does add quite a lot. We definitely, in fact, I think the commentary team were talking to Dan Vickers at the time of us getting a penalty and taking 3 points, and even Dan Vickers himself said that Alex Lewington was about a mile offside, and the penalty shouldn't have been given. So we earned 3 there. So we're on a 7-point swing at the moment. But yeah, I mean, what do you think of the penalty try potential, actually, Barry?
It could have been given. I suspect it was one of those. I mean, I'm not sure how it finished up, but at one point we were miles in front on the penalty count. We'd been penalised left, right, and centre, and I suspect had they had a higher number of penalties, had Edinburgh had a higher number of penalties at that point in the game, then it might have gone against them. But he's probably looked at that and gone, well, okay, it's the same fella, it's the same offence twice in quick succession. You were probably going to get either a penalty try or a yellow card. You probably weren't going to get both. You'd have to be exceptionally convinced of it. Or you'd literally have to put it over on the line or whatever to have that happen. So probably the right decision. I don't really like to see penalty tries unless they're blatant, because I'd rather teams actually scored tries rather than the referee just trotted over and stood under the crossbar and blew his whistle. But it could have been given. It couldn't have been given another day, another referee. It probably would have been. But there we go. You have to deal with it at the time.
Yeah, and to be honest, I do think you're right. You know, we conceded 1,000,001 penalties. So for us to get a massive bonus out of one of the very few that Edinburgh actually conceded would have possibly been a bit over the top. So yeah, we're probably about even there. But you know, we have to rewind back towards the start of the game. We've talked about players tackling lower and lower and lower under the rules, and 2 players that, well, they didn't really make any effort to tackle low at all. Jamie George and Marco Riccioni, who both came off worse from their attempted tackles, both received a yellow card for head-on-head collisions. I mean, let's talk about Marco's one first, because there's obviously more to discuss with Jamie George, but I think Marco's was actually the worst of the 2. Personally, and I think on any other day it could have been a red card. I think the fact that he was a bit more passive, and the fact that he came off worse, and there was obviously a bit of aggression from the attacker as well, meant that it was down to a yellow card. But it's a pretty tricky one, I think, isn't it, Barry?
It is, and obviously we don't like to see players potentially concussed and having to go off because of HIAs, and we do want to see both the ball carrier and the tackler better protected. But having said that, I've never understood why the ball carrier gets a free hit in this, literally a free hit, because on both occasions, I mean, neither Marco nor Jamie could reach the head of the player that they were tackling if they just stood there. And it's definitely a lowering of height and an aggressive leading. I mean, the Marco Riccioni one, if you look at it very closely, the Edinburgh ball carrier actually leads with his head. That is the furthest part of him forward, and he's dipping into it as well. And it's not. I don't even think Marco Riccioni actually really tries that hard to tackle him. I think he just got kind of. It's almost as if he gets run into, to be quite honest with you. And yeah, the way the laws are done, you get a free pass if you've got the ball, and that doesn't quite seem right to me. But probably in the context of the game, that those were 2 decisions the referee probably got right, I think.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And yeah, I think it's really tricky actually, how you judge the ball carrier, because yes, 100%, you know, they shouldn't just have a completely free pass, and they shouldn't be able to, you know, smash people out of the way with their forearm or their shoulder or their head. quite why anyone would lead with their head who's got any sense. I have no idea. But there's also a part of me that goes, well, the player's carrying the ball and they know they're going into contact. They're going to brace in some way. And I can't think of a way that they're not going to be leading with either arm, shoulder or head in that situation. I don't know. It's really, really tricky. But then you get into the very subjective area of judging the aggression of the attacker and whether they've deliberately taken that contact and aimed to smash their way through with a shoulder or with their head, or whether it is just that natural, you're running into something, a pretty heavy object, so you're protecting yourself. I don't really know where we stand on that. I think, a lot of people, it depends on what colour shirt you're wearing in the stands, I think, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've said before, but certainly I've said before that I watch these things with an incredibly parochial eye. I always think Saracens in England are always over refereed, according to me. So I'm never really going to change from that. And the referee's got a really, really tough job to do out there. And I know there's a team before them, and they do. I mean, he made a pretty good go through of talking it through with the TMO, and they kind of agreed. I mean, they tend to anyway. TMO, generally speaking, goes with what the referee says, and that's fine. But he did a good job of explaining his thought process, and he was consistent across both incidents. And that's probably what you really want to see is the consistency. You wouldn't want to see one red and one yellow, or one red and one dismissed as nothing at all, sort of thing. So. Yeah, but fair dues. We can overanalyze, and we can say, well, I thought this was that, and I thought that was something else. And live and in play, I think the referees probably got both of those right, as by the letter of the law. And yet, we need to look at lowering that tackle height somehow, but it is tricky when you've got someone like that running at you at full pilt, and when they lower their height as well, it's going to make it very, very difficult for there not to be collisions.
No, and I think you've absolutely nailed it, whether you're meant to or not, on the consistency side of things. I mean, I've said on the show previously that all of these arguments for total consistency from all referees across all games is it's completely impossible. Refereeing is subjective, matches are random. There's never going to be total consistency. However, consistency within a single game is possible, and that is exactly what we had. Two incidents, very, very similar. They both had the same result. Had he given one red and one yellow, you'd have wanted to hear a very good explanation from the referee of why that was the case. And the way they actually explained it, I think, was pretty reasonable. Like we've said, I think the attacking players were particularly aggressive in how they led with their head or shoulder. But I think, and I do agree that there should be a little bit of leniency for the attacker, because they're the ones running at full tilt and they're bracing for contact. There is going to be an element of aggression in there always. Otherwise, we're not playing a contact sport. It's on the defender first. But yeah, the issue really was that for both Marco and Jamie, there was no effort whatsoever to get any lower than their natural standing height. So they were putting themselves in the vulnerable position to have head contact. If they'd have stooped, bent at the hip, pivoted, whatever, and the attacking player had then forearmed them in the face and knocked them over, then it's a penalty and a yellow card the other way. But yes, probably between the two of us, what we're saying is that actually they were right. The game kind of evened up, and we deserve to lose. End of.
Yeah.
But that isn't actually the end of the story, because unfortunately we do have to discuss what followed with Jamie George. Now, I'm very, very uncomfortable with what played out over the course of the next 20 minutes. You could see that from that collision, Jamie didn't know what his name was and what planet he was on. He was on the floor for quite some time. And I think you don't have to be a doctor to say that he's taken a proper clout on the head and needed to come off that pitch, which he did. we obviously don't know the finer details of exactly what's happened, but we can only assume that he passed an HIA, came back on the pitch, and the independent doctor at half-time said, no, he's got to come off. That is what it seems to me. I'm sure, actually, it's going to be investigated because it wasn't a good look, and we might find out that various other things happened. But I don't know, are you as concerned as me about how that played out, Barry?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got the HIA criteria in front of me on the screen.
Nice.
And I know I'm such a nose. the off-field HIA assessment is not limited to blah blah blah. Right. So let's start with this. Players displaying obvious on-pitch signs of concussion, criteria 1, are immediately and permanently removed from play, and the completion of the off-field assessment tool is not required. Therefore, if any of the medical staff, Saracens or the independent doctor, had seen what happened live or on the replay, then it's fairly obvious that Jamie George should not have been allowed back onto that rugby pitch. Whether there was some confusion in that either no one saw it, or by the time he got off the pitch or he got some medical attention because he was yellow carded at the same time, whether there was some miss of it being seen there, I mean, maybe he's just trotted off and said, "Oh, I was winded." I mean, that's kind of the sort of the story that's come out. But if either our doctor or the officials in the game or the independent doctor has seen what we saw on the television, then he shouldn't have been allowed back on that pitch, and that was the end of it. And whether he doesn't need to have an HIA for that, because there was enough, for me, there was enough evidence live on the telly that he should have been removed from that game. We don't know what's gone on. We hope there's no repercussions. First of all, for Jamie, we hope he's all right, and we hope there's no repercussions for the medical staff involved, because it might have been a genuine oversight. It might have been something that went wrong and they just didn't see it at the time. But it did look. It looked to us, and it looked to everyone on social media as well, to be a strange decision.
Yes, yeah, and I think obviously some idiots are going to say it was foul play on Saracen's part, trying to brush it under the carpet or whatever and keep our star hooker on the pitch, but that's total rubbish, to be honest. I mean, Mark McCall at the end of the game said it was absolutely right, once he'd seen the footage himself as well, that he was withdrawn at half time and he had absolutely no complaints about it. So I think it's exactly as you said, the independent doctor didn't see it live. We don't know what pictures and what they've got access to at the time. I think it shows that actually the independent doctor should almost have more access to footage than a TMO does, even. They need to be scrutinising an awful lot of the game. It didn't help, unfortunately, that Jim Hamilton was on commentary and said, "Oh yeah, they said he's winded." Obviously, people assume the worst about that, but he probably was winded, judging by the tackle. But he was also concussed. So, like you, I'd like to think that it was genuine mistakes, but it's very important that those mistakes are learnt from, because we have seen similar incidents in international rugby even, and in various other games where players are absolutely all over the place, and it's just not been picked up by medical staff, and it's very important that it is, because otherwise we talk more about this tackling at the ankles and losing the game of rugby. We have to be looking after players.
Yeah, absolutely. The player welfare has to be at the front centre of all the decisions that we make, and in this case, it's hard to see how it's happened, but we are going to have to assume that it is a genuine error somewhere. I don't want to criticise the players, but I think also perhaps they've got to be a little bit more responsible themselves. And in a case like that, I think it probably beholden on the guy who's been concussed to say, no, actually, whether you saw it or not, I don't think I'm fit to continue. So they have to take some responsibility themselves. But it seems strange that none of the medical staff saw that. they should have done. We did.
Absolutely, yeah. And just for anyone who is maybe not a Saracens fan that's listening, that's crying blood and thinks that both Jamie George and Marco Riccioni should have a 6-week ban for yet another Saracens high tackle. Breaking news. EPCR have released their list of sightings and neither of them are on it. So that means that everyone agrees yellow card. End of story, move on, and hopefully both of them go through the correct concussion protocols and they're back soon as well.
Either that or it's another conspiracy theory and we've greased the palms of the ECPR along with the RFU, Premiership Rugby Limited, Uncle Tom Cobley and the bloke who runs the McDonald's stall outside the ground.
That's a hell of a lot of money we're having to chuck at it, isn't it? I wonder where we're finding that from. Anyway.
All those shell companies.
Well, there's another bit of not great news, and we'll wait and see what happens with Elliot Daly, because he did look like he came off the pitch with a little tweak. And I don't think he was having a particularly good game, but that might have been because he was half cropped.
Yeah, he sort of needed treatment a couple of times before he finally admitted defeat and came off. But yeah, we hope he's okay, and obviously we hope. I guess from the England performance squad or whatever they're calling it, he was going to get this week off anyway, because his name's not Farrell. But actually, do you know what? I'm going to touch on that. All these people jumping up and down saying that Farrell should be banned for the Scotland game, and he's only it's all a fiddle, so he's allegedly available for the Bristol game, have forgotten one thing. If he's banned for the Scotland game, he is available for the Bristol game by default.
Very true.
Therefore, his ban expires before the Scotland game. But yeah, I mean, yeah. Let's hope that all the England players are okay and are up for the Calcutta Cup on the 4th, because I'll be there.
Oh, lucky you! I can't remortgage my flat, unfortunately, so I won't be there, Barry. But
no, it's an expensive hobby. I only go to one of the Six Nations games ever, and I've not been since before COVID. So
no, I think that's fair enough. But yeah, I mean, let's a couple more bits from the Edinburgh game. We're really going to do it to death today, I think. But you know, it was a tough outing. We've touched on Ben Earl, certainly for his try, and Ironi Mawi's little cameo. Was there anyone that sort of stood out as someone that was, you know, part of the reason why we stayed in that game? Really, you know, we can't really talk about fantastic performances because there weren't any, but there were certainly some brave and very Saracens-esque backs to the wall performances, weren't there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to take a collective bunch of players out of that, then it has to be the forwards. I mean, with all the changes and with all the chopping and changing and the late injuries to Mako and everything, to perform like that was superb. And I'm gonna pick on the front rows and our friend Christian Judge as well. What a performance he put in when he came on, and he was right up for it. You could see that, and all the forwards were. And I just think as a pack we did very, very well, because despite the changing personnel as they rotated in out and with yellow cards and HIAs and whatever else, we pretty much won most of the scrums, I think
we did, yeah. And I mean, yeah, that Edinburgh pack is essentially an international
Scotland
pack. Yeah. I mean, you've got someone like WP Nell who looks like the prototype of a prop from about 1950 and is about that old as well.
Yeah.
And for him to come on and not dominate in the scrum is quite unusual, actually. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. The front row as a whole was part of our brilliant performance. Forwards, definitely. I'm going to ignore Billy Vunipola because I got annoyed with some of the petulance from him, but he's had a bad week, and I'm going to leave him alone. But one other person I feel really sorry for, because the line out that we won actually came to absolutely nothing, and so it wouldn't have been on a highlight reel. But Alex Lazowski played a quite brilliant 50-22 from a box kick, essentially. We'd sort of won the ball back in open field, and he pretty much booted the ball back over his head, almost from his own 22 into the Edinburgh 22. And that, for me, was one of our brightest moments of the match. And of course, we completely lost the line out, and it was, forgotten history then. But just a little shout for that. But in general, I think it kind of looked a little bit disjointed in the backs, didn't it, Barry?
Yeah, it did. We didn't really, apart from our try, we didn't really throw any. The phrase is we didn't throw any of our own punches. We spent most of the time on the back foot trying to keep them out rather than actually threatening their line ourselves, and that was disappointing. And that was not what we've done this season in other games. We've tried to go out and play our game. It's great stopping the opposition, but it only takes you so far, and you do have to go and score some tries yourself. And it was a shame that we never really got going attacking wise, and just ended up with a brilliant backs to the wall, effort. But we were never going to win that game in a month of Sundays.
Absolutely right. But we lost it by a small enough amount to mean that we've got a home last 16 match, as it is, in this variant of the Champions Cup. And we're playing against Ospreys, who dial back the years. I was at Vicarage Road when we played them in the Heineken Cup last time, and on a snowy day, when Sarri the Camel was, I don't think he was actually driving the hovercraft that was spraying the snow away from the pitch, but he was certainly in it. So it was a very, very memorable day. But probably quite important that we have a home match from a financial sense as well as a rugby sense, isn't it, Barry?
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed that they did away with the two-leg format for this round, which they had last year, obviously in both the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup. That I thought that worked quite well. Yeah,
no, I definitely agree. But I suppose it is a slightly condensed season with the World Cup coming up, and a few things had to give. I mean, there's a lot about this European tournament that I don't like. I'd like a return to what it was previously, but.
What do you mean, European teams?
Well, yeah, that'd help, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm quite an environmentally minded person, so these flights backwards and forwards to South Africa and Cornwall and wherever else we need to go over the course of the next few years, there's got to be a better way of going about things, really. But hey ho, that's a discussion for another day. But if we get past Ospreys, the very next week. We have a hastily arranged fixture, potentially either La Rochelle away, which I'm sure will be a lovely trip for anyone that can either buy the tickets in advance and just go there anyway, or pick them up last minute for several thousands of pounds at a go, or we play Gloucester at home if they can get past La Rochelle, which is going to be pretty tasty in itself. So what would you rather, Barry?
Well, I suppose I'll be greedy and say let's have the home game against Gloucester. But I mean, whoever we play, it's going to be tricky. We have to. All we can really do is think about the Ospreys game first, and that's not going to be easy. They are on quite a good run of form from what I've seen, and they will be no pushovers whenever the game is. I just hope it's not another flipping midnight on a Saturday game.
Yes, yeah, no, it's who knows what's going to happen with that one. And yeah, like you say, Ospreys. I think it's nice to see a couple of those Welsh sides having a bit of resurgence, really, isn't it? So yeah, definitely good. But,
yeah, definitely. It can't all be Ireland and France.
Well, there we go. You'd hope, wouldn't you? But that's a long-term look ahead. That's a good few months away now. The Six Nations happens first, and plenty of league fixtures happen in between that as well. And we've got Bristol next week, so it's a men's and women's Bristol Bears double, one at the Stonex and one away. But,
does that make it a pair of Bristols? Did I say that out loud?
It does make it a pair of Bristols, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. They're in two very different locations, though, which is slightly strange. But
absolutely. Different cups as well.
Oh, dear. Yes. Anyway.
You can cut that out.
No, we're keeping that one in, Barry. That's going out there for everyone to hear, including me talking about cutting it out. But yeah, minus our England contingent for Bristol, but hopefully with some of the other internationals that have been called. Although that's, well, Tompkins, Maitland, Christie would be around. You'd expect Riccione is being sat down for a little while. So, we could be 9 or 10 players short for Bristol, but they've got a few troubles of their own as well.
Yeah, we could be. If Billy had got picked, I think Jez would have been bringing his boots on Saturday for a game at number 8.
You mean Jez can play number 8?
Well, apparently, yeah. He never mentions it, but No, it's going to be tricky for us. We've got an awful lot of injuries, particularly obviously injuries and call-ups rather, I should say, particularly in the forwards. It's going to be whoever we've got, and it'll be interesting to see who's on the bench, if nothing else, because I can't actually think of all the think of the relevant names off the top of my head. Who's going to get a game? So it'll be a challenge. Bristol we spoke off air. They don't quite seem to be the sum of their parts this season, which is odd because they've got some cracking players down there. And if they do get it together, and they certainly did last season at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the game against us, if they do get it together, we could find ourselves with a heck of a scrap on Saturday.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can finish the show with me having a huge amount of egg on my face because in a lovely league predictor that I predicted Bristol Bears to finish top of the pile. So very, very wrong. But as you say, they do have a lot of fantastic players and it's just not clicking for them. So I think they'll be quite dangerous. But yeah, we'll look forward to that at the weekend. But anyway, thank you very much for your time, Barry. I think the two of us have managed to out-talk Jez today. So we've done our bit, haven't we?
We've done our best, and I'm sure Jez will be back firing on all cylinders next week.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a few weeks worth of ranting for him to get off his chest, isn't there? But yeah, we'll get that when we come to it, and we'll see you all again next week, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.
This is the Fezcast.